Hi guys, welcome back to Kavana Cricket Cast. I'm your host Pratham. I'm joined by my mate Rohan, and today we're going to be discussing the first match of this 2022 IPL season, a showdown between the finalists of last season, Chennai Super Kings and Kolkata Knight Riders. And Rohan, the first thing I just wanted to say, man, is it's great to be back covering the IPL. We sort of started out the show doing it
1 year ago. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so kind of happy about that, man. Geez, we need to go back and look at like our clips from like 1 year ago to see how terrible of a job we did.
Yeah.
yeah.
Man. A lot of fun though. We've had a lot of fun over the last year just following cricket and coming back to another IPL final. Not final. IPL first match.
Yeah, played by the finalists of last season. See, we're not perfect still, but no, it's been good, man. And
as a semblance of deferment to the victors, I'm wearing KKR purple. This actually had nothing to do with deferment to the victors. It's simply because I grabbed that out of my clothes and my dresser today morning. It was like, I feel like wearing purple today.
You've got to like commit to the bit, dude. Nah.
Well, you know me.
Yeah, no, fair enough, man. I mean,
there's a reason why I'm not here in the crowd corner.
No, man. I mean, I'm wearing orange. So I can't even claim anything of that sort.
Orange cap, maybe.
Nice. But no. All right. All jokes and fun apart. Let's get down to the match itself, right? And this was a really interesting match to start off the season with.
Yeah, I like the word interesting because it wasn't a fun match.
No, it wasn't a fun match. It was kind of one-sided in the end, but it was interesting because there was a lot of things we kind of expected to happen that didn't really happen. So let's get down to the details about that, and let's actually start off with talking about the squads in relation to that. So in terms of the squads, and in particular in terms of the teams that were selected for this match, right? We have KKR's team, Wankhede Iyer opening alongside Ajinkya Rahane, Alex Hales having to go back home, so Rahane comes in as the domestic opener for that performance. Iyer, the captain, at 3, Rana at 4, Billings at 5, the all-rounders in Russell, Narayan, Jackson, the wicketkeeper, nominally at 8, although we saw something different in this match. Umesh Yadav, Mavi, and Chakravarti being the bowlers that bring up the unit. For CSK, a new-look squad as well. I know, Rohan, that you definitely have some thoughts about how that squad is, but the side that was picked today, right, was Gaikwad. He was pretty much a constant. Devon Conway being the new opener in the ranks, and a new team member who's opening alongside Gaikwad. Uttapa at 3, Rayudu at 4, Jadeja, now the captain of CSK, at 5.
Last minute change.
Yeah, so that definitely came as a shock to me. I wasn't expecting it. Dhoni, the wicketkeeper, at 6. Then you have the likes of Dubey, Santner, Bravo, Mill, and then Deshpande, who are the bowlers come bowling all-rounders that make up the playing 11. Now, obviously, guys, over the course of the match, the actual order in which they came out to bat was a little bit different, but that was prior to the start of the match. What we were given to understand would be the composition of the 11. But if we start with KKR, right? I thought it was a pretty good squad, given some of the constraints they had. No Pat Cummins. He's in Pakistan celebrating the Australian Test team win. He's been playing a series there. So I understood it in that context. And it was mostly a pretty good 11 that I thought they picked. But I thought the decision to pick 2 wicketkeepers in Sam Billings, who can and occasionally does keep for England, he even kept in the Test match, Ron, if you remember, in the Ashes. And then you had you had 2 wicket-keeping options, right, in the same team. Because you had Sam Billings, and then you also had Sheldon Jackson, who's like this domestic stalwart, who's been like a Ranji, heavy run scorer and so forth. But he doesn't even sometimes don the gloves in Ranji itself. So it's kind of weird.
I think that those two things sort of play into each other, right? No Pat Cummins. So you pick Sam Billings, right? Because he's an overseas player. He can bat. He's a solid overseas bat.
That's true.
So you pick him, because he's the most replaceable of your overseas options, right? Because you can't really drop Sunil Narayan, and you can't really drop Russell when Pat Cummins comes back. So Sam Billings is sort of like that sacrificial lamb. He's out there to bowl, not to bowl, to bat, basically, in place of Pat Cummins. Pat Cummins comes in, everyone else moves up one in the order. Pat Cummins comes in at number 8.
Yeah, but pretty good point actually. Yeah, but it did come across as odd, right? Like I'm.
Yeah, no, I mean, like it makes perfect sense. But like the other reason I think it is that I think they rate Jackson as a better keeper than they rate Billings.
And we'll come on a little bit later when we're discussing the match to that, right? Because it's something we were mentioning when we were watching the match, right? That did seem to be
it seems to be a very canny decision on that.
Indeed.
On KKR's part.
To CSK, Ron, I was curious to get to know what your thoughts were about this playing 11 that they picked for this inaugural game.
So, as a CSK fan, it is a bit weird, I think, and I don't mean this in a bad way. I'm not like slating any of these players other than one player who we will come on to, who we have consistently slated on this podcast. And no, it's not Shardul Thakur. I can't believe that I want Shardul Thakur back in my cricket team.
Yeah, how bad must the replacement be in our books that we're actively praising and wishing Shardul came back for CSK?
Yeah.
Sorry for doing it.
No, it's all good. I mean, I'm in the same position. My view is that I think, all things considered, I think this was a pretty good sign considering what happened over the last year, right? Since the final, right? That final team was, I call it CSK's last dance, right? It's in that sense of like that final season with my MJ and Bulls. That sense, basketball. That they've now made a documentary on ESPN about the last dance. This is the last chance this core of players is going to play together. I think a similar thing has happened because when you look at the squad, right? There are 5 players out of the 11 that played for CSK last season. Gaikwad, Jadeja, Raidu, Dhoni, and Bravo.
That's true. Yeah, so it is really a new squad. But how does that, in your opinion, translate to like the playing 11? Were there any things that you found a bit controversial?
Yeah, I mean, my point is that when you have such a new squad, you have to bring in new players, right? And those new players may not fit into what the model for CSK is. Wankhede, I do think they should have probably gone with KM Asif over him. Overall, there weren't a lot of complaints with the squad because, again, it's a new team. That it used to be you'd have a CSK squad where you know that like three of the bowlers have over 100 caps for CSK. They know exactly the game plan. They know the system that Fleming wants them to play and how how Dhoni wants them to use that system. Yeah. That's no longer the case. So you kind of expect a little bit of change.
Let's move on to the pitch. The match was played at the Wankhede. Historically, in IPL matches, even in a lot of other matches that are played on this particular ground, it's known for producing a really good batting track, which has reasonable bounce, reasonable carry, reasonable pace, especially good in comparison to a lot of other Indian tracks. And when I saw the pitch,
you could say the Chepak.
Well, Ron, you put words into my mouth that I will gleefully accept.
Or the Kolkata. We can also make fun of the Kolkata.
Yeah, we can make fun of both Delhiites and people from Chennai on this show. No.
Equal opportunity to make fun of because...
Yeah, absolutely. But it tends to be generally a good track, and especially in IPL, it tends to be a bit of a belter, right? Like 180 scores here, 190 scores are very likely to be seen, especially early on in the season when the pitch is at its freshest. And when I looked at the pitch, at first glance, right? It was easy to see why you would assume that to be the case again. The smattering of grass that was on it was pretty even, the covering, so to speak. So it promised what would be a really even, flat-looking surface. But there were telltale signs, Ron, that also indicated that the pitch would have something in it for the Pacers, a little bit more than even usual. Because it was marginally greener, right? Like there was more coarse green grass that was that was present there, and it was a little bit damper. So that that would imply to me that there was some moisture in the wicket, right? And that in turn sort of generally tends to help with in terms of a little bit more movement for the quicks. There's a little bit of tackiness, right? So the odd ball stops in and out. So it becomes a little bit more two-pace, the wicket. And that's really how it did play out. Although, all in all, it was a pretty good pitch. And it was one where, as the match went on, you could tell that it would become progressively more flatter. And it would do less and less as the ball got old, especially, right? So I thought a par total here would have been around the 155, 165 mark. And
yeah, I agree with you on that. I think that looked par.
Yeah, and with that all in mind, right, I thought Iyer's decision at the toss to bowl first made plenty of sense. So let's come to the way the game played out itself. And I'll start from the very start, because at the very start of the match, Umesh Yadav left a pretty marked impression on me. He produced what I can only describe as a superb opening spell. It was 3 overs that were given to him in the power play, and the way that he bowled, right, it was so impressive because it was so mature, right? I've seen Umesh Yadav, since I was young in the Indian side when he first came in as a tearaway quick, and
Umesh Yadav and control in mature is not a word that comes up much. It does. Umesh Yadav the person, yes. Umesh Yadav the bowler, no.
Not so much, but it was really a noticeably, a noticeably intelligent spell of fast bowling, because he recognized the pitch had a combination of good bounce, right, but it was also a wicket where the ground itself, right, had comparatively shorter straight boundaries than wider ones. So what he did was that he refrained from pitching the ball up to try to make it curve sharply, and he instead really concentrated on bowling back of a length on around an off to middle stump line, delivered from close to the stumps. And so by doing this, I felt, Ron, he was able to make even the slightest seam or swing movement, because he was coming so close to the stumps, in both directions appear more exaggerated than it would be if he was moving a little bit more wider to the crease than he usually likes normally to bowl in. And what it also did is sort of allowed him to, with that sort of length that he was bowling from that particular angle and in that line, he was sort of able to constrict the free-flowing offside stroke play that's preferred by the likes of Gaikwad and Conway earlier on in the innings, right? And because he was able to do that really well, even when he bowled the odd one that wasn't quite in that camp of consistency, he was able to force them essentially to go after that rare delivery that they perceived to be delivered at a wider line or even at a slightly shorter length. Having said all of that, one of the things we talk about in the show is you can bowl really well, but you need to have often support from your captain with fields, right? We've said this so many times, Ron, when we've watched.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we said this so many times about one specific bowler and one specific captain.
That's true.
It's sort of like like if people are making memes, this is one of the memes that they'd be making about this
about us. Yeah. But in that regard, right? I thought that Iyer did a really good job supporting him.
I genuinely do think that Shreyas Iyer is one of the best captains in the IPL
at the moment,
because he does stuff like this and he knows the game pretty well.
Yeah, and to that point, right? He set fields with ample protection deep on both sides square of the wicket, and so it discouraged the likes of Conway, who likes pulling, for example, really well, to pull the aerial, use the aerial back foot shot that he could execute really well aggressively, that could have thrown off Umesh if he was bowling a back of a length delivery. So all around, I thought it was really good execution of a sensible plan from Hatch by Umesh and Iyer, accounting for the conditions at hand. So that was my thoughts initially about how the standout performance from a KKR standpoint in the bowling department. Now, in terms of the batting department, Rohan, I know you have some thoughts about that. So what did you think?
I think as you said, Umesh deserves full credit for how he bowled. But I also don't think that Gaikwad and Conway applied themselves in the way that I have seen them do, both internationally and domestically, in those sort of pressurized situations.
Fair.
It's a little bit unfair on Gaikwad. He's a young player, right?
That's true.
But he just came off being the best player in the IPL last season. It's unfair, but at the same time, when you reach those standards,
expectations go high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think they need to do better. That's something that I think. Hopefully it'll come along as the season goes on, but
yeah, not a great start.
Yeah. But the other thing that I think was really, really cool was how well Robin Uthappa came in that situation where, we've lost 2 wickets for not much. And really trying to get momentum back in the CSK camp. And it took some very slick keeping from Mr. Jackson to dismiss him.
Yeah, that like lightning fast, stumping.
Someone said on, I think it was on Cricket Info, they referred to it as MS Dhoni-esque. Because it was one of those stumpings that Dhoni used to do in his prime. He was just like, okay, I got the ball, and the bail's already off. Your foot has come off the ground by 1 millimeter, and you're out. And it's just like, what do you do to stop that? You can't.
Oh, fair enough. But yeah, he played.
But I also think we need to give a moment to a shout out to a particular player, Shivam Dube, who remains the most pointless player in the IPL.
He's not very good, is he?
No. I don't understand why teams keep consistently going out. Like, first of all, I don't hate Shivam Dube, the person. I don't know Shivam Dube. I don't hate Shivam Dube. I don't think that he should be kicked out of cricket entirely, right?
No, obviously.
You know what? It's his job. And I don't have his job. I'd love to have his job if I was any good, but I'm not going to disrespect the hustle, right?
but it does seem.
But it makes no sense that teams are so consistently fixated on getting this one guy who seems to be both below average with the bat and below average with the ball.
And below average as a fielder too, from what.
And below average as a fielder. That's it's like, what do you bring to the team that justifies teams being interested in getting him year after year?
Yeah, because he nearly got run out, and then he got out to like a terrible shot.
In the space of 3 balls, he gets out in almost 2 different ways.
Yeah, not a great start for him to this season.
I do think a lot of the reason that CSK got a target to get at is the 2 old warhorses, Jadeja and Dhoni, got back up, came on, and were like, okay, we need to consolidate, and then we need to go and accelerate, and maybe we get 100 runs, maybe a little bit more to bowl at on this wicket. They ended up right around that mark. I think some very good batting at the death by Dhoni to put away some very bad balls by the KKR bowlers, in particular Shivam Mavi.
Yeah.
And coming back to the point about Umesh, I thought he bowled really well. I think the rest of that bowling lineup kind of let him down.
Yeah, and specifically in the case of Mavi, right? That bowling at the death was.
Oh my god, it was so bad, Pratham.
It was not very good.
He bowls a wide. Okay, that's understandable. Sometimes that happens, right? I will never blame a bowler for bowling a wide.
Then he bowls a no ball.
Then he bowls a no ball. And he gets hit for a 4 on that no ball.
Yeah.
Just, he opened the door back up into CSK having, oh wait, we could actually still win this match. We just need
or at least get to
1 or 2 things to go our way.
Yeah. Or at least even get a total of respectability, right, to your point.
Yeah.
But, for me, right, Rohan, it's kind of disappointing because this was an issue for him in the previous season. And it happens for this very similar reasons, right? he tends to stray too full and wide at the death, and he delivers with like a very floaty trajectory, right? And it sort of makes him prone to being smashed in those last.
Do you think that adding something like an off cutter would help him out?
It would actually, and he did experiment with it last season actually. So and he bowled it well, and it actually worked a lot of the time, right? Because and on this surface, right, it would actually help a lot, right, Rowan? Because the ball gripped here a little bit, right?
Yeah.
It gripped in the air, it stopped in the air. So having an off cutter, it could have bounced a little bit awkwardly. It could have come at varying paces, and then suddenly somebody like Dhoni, right, and doesn't find it so easy. I did think that that's sort of spoiled what was a really good performance initially from Umesh, and the final total that CSK had of 130 odd, it wasn't great, but it was
defendable.
Yeah,
CSK has defended lower totals.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was something that they could defend, even if it was 20 or 30 runs under par for what was the par total on course for this particular pitch. So yeah, all in all, disappointing showing from CSK in their first innings. Decent showing from the really good showing, depending on the bowler in question, from KKR. But it set up an interesting second half of the match. So let's come to the KKR chase and conversely the CSK defense of that relatively mediocre total. And the first thing I want to talk to you about, Rowan, is I saw when I was watching the chase, right, there was a stark contrast that had developed between the first innings of this match and the second innings of this match, right? Umesh, as we talked about, bowled brilliantly in that first half of the match, especially in those first power play overs, and really set the tone and put CSK in a position where they couldn't really recover to get a good total on the board. It was going to be super important for Chennai, right, to have somebody in those first 6 overs to be able to do the same thing that Umesh did, if not better, in order to equally apply this pressure and the screws on KKR to make their chase as difficult as possible, because the total that they had, or the amount of runs they had to play with in the first place, wasn't that great. And so they entrusted the responsibility of getting those desperately needed new ball breakthroughs, given the low total, to Adam Mill and Tushar Deshpande. And comparing Deshpande in this match to Umesh Yadav is actually really interesting, right? Because Deshpande, again, similar kind of role, and was expected to sort of provide those breakthroughs, and he didn't. He seemed to be actually a really lackluster substitute for Deepak Chahar, who's out of the season and normally would bowl for CSK in those power play overs, as you've alluded to. And just in general, man, I know the stats won't show this, right? They'll show that he bowled somewhat decently, and he wasn't really collared by any batsman as such. For too many runs. He bowled a lot of dots in the power play, right? But he bowled really innocuously, and he just very often just bowled a line in contrast to the field that was set for him. Yeah. So he leaked runs at critical times when there was pressure being built up because of that, right? So I can think of the example of him bowling to Wankhede, right, in the second or the third and the fifth overs, respectively, right? So the field was set for him, right? From Jadeja, they gave him 3 men inside the 30-yard circle on the leg side, and there was a massive gap between backwards point and extra cover. There were no slips there as well, and so that field would necessitate Deshpande to sort of pitch the ball around a middle to leg line from over the wicket to Iyer, right? Because that would allow it to be coming pretty straight. Iyer would have to flick him. He wouldn't have too many shots to open up the offside play unless he had to take some sort of crazy risk to do it. But what he ended up doing was he ended up bowling these fourth stump half volleys, right? So floaty, full, drive balls, right? And because of that, Iyer, I thought, was able to easily dispatch those to that really big vacant gap between that point and that extra cover, the backwards point. And because he was sort of letting off that sort of pressure on one end, right? Chennai weren't really able to get a wicket in Kolkata's power play. And that, I thought, just really set things up for KKR because it put them in a really favorable position towards chasing what was already a substandard total from the very start.
Yeah. On the other end, however, I think Rahane batted very well to get KKR off to a quick start. So that's a positive for them going forward. Veteran Indian player comes in, does his job. We want to go into him because I know he's your favorite player.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's always nice to see Rahane bat, and it's always nice to see him back in high-profile matches, right? He's been axed from the Indian cricket team. There was a good chance we wouldn't see him, in any high-profile matches apart from some domestic matches, and he would finish off his career like that. But he got a chance because Alex Hales, who would have been their first-choice opener, left the IPL, and so he got a chance to open here. And, he started out a little bit he wasn't as comfortable, right? He initially struggled a little bit because the pitch had played slightly awkwardly at the start with the new ball. And so he struggled against some of the back of the length deliveries that came in at a slightly different pace, even though they were delivered by the same pace because of the nature of the pitch. It was two-paced and slightly inconsistent. But to his credit, right, Rohan, I thought he settled in pretty quick. And then he cashed in the moment the bowlers made even like a slight mistake. So I'm talking like whenever they overpitched, he drove them full-buttedly. He had that really great straight drive, that gorgeous straight drive. So he played shots like that. But then I noticed that it seemed like a conscious strategy from him. Every time they pitched the ball where it wasn't just back of a length, but it was a little shorter than that, right? He'd pull them over, mid-wicket and deep square leg. There was a big gap that Jadeja left, and he exploited that fully and hammered him there. And he was really responsible for getting KKR into a position where the win seemed like a certainty, even though the substandard total would have suggested that. He was the one who made it really look like CSK weren't going to have a chance defending this. But I'm sure he'll be disappointed though. Like he didn't get his 50. He didn't stay at the end of the crease, and the way he got out too, right? Like that delivery from Jadeja was not good. It was dragged down. He pulled it straight to the hands of the mid wicket, so that was a bit disappointing to see. But I thought it was a good innings overall from Rahane as a whole.
I agree. I thought that he persisted quite well until he fell for 44. I think Rana and Billings played quite well for their 20s as well. And Iyer and Jackson obviously just saw KKR home for a pretty comfortable win. Your thoughts, however, on the CSK bowling side beyond our good friend at the start?
Yeah. So I mean, it's a tale of two halves, right? Because I mean, there's obviously the chase was one-sided and pretty damning for Chennai because most of their bowlers looked innocuous, but there was one bowler that did stand out. And it's a guy who's been standing out for a while actually for CSK and managed to do it even though he's 40 at this point. It's not, it's usually the age which you retire at, but he's been doing a really good job. Dwayne Bravo. And he proved really to be the one bowler who seemed to consistently pose a wicket-taking threat from CSK. In particular, his couple of overs, right, that he bowled immediately after the power play we're talking from over 6 to 10, really. Were very useful because they yielded two critical wickets of batsmen that were, the danger men, so to speak, from KKR, right? Wankhede Iyer being one of them. He was last year's, IPL batting revelation. And then Nitish Rana, who also has been kind of a dangerous player. So he gave Chennai, I thought, hope that they could potentially make a comeback in a match where they seemed to be down and out. But yeah. So, I mean, that, I thought, impact-wise, he made a really good performance. But then I also really liked his performance, Rohan, because it was a really shrewd performance, right? And you have to be shrewd as somebody like Bravo because
when he had a career that's, almost, 22 years long?
Yeah.
As a professional cricketer?
Yeah. And he's not as quick as he used to be, and he's not... He's got certain skill sets that have diminished over time, but he's, gone over the years, refined his craft, and now he has a lot more, ability, I think, to, read a batsman's weakness and then sort of ruthlessly exploit that flaw. So in this match, we saw that, right? Because the two wickets he got were on the basis of exploiting a weakness of an opponent. Venkatesh Iyer, for example, the wicket he got for that. Venkatesh Iyer, he doesn't really use his feet very much. He plays away from the body with the little lead front foot, so forth, towards deliveries that are sort of wide and that are at a good length. So we're talking 6 to 7 sub line. And so what he did, I thought was really good against him, was he set him up, right? So the first ball that he bowled to him was a back of a length delivery that was around fourth stump. And then the second one, he angled it across further from Iyer at a fuller length. And because he was able to do that, right, at a, fuller length than the shorter the length, back of the length that he was bowling, right, he sort of induced that fatal shot that got Iyer out. And then the Rana, right, he noticed the fact that Rana struggles against short pitch delivery. Last season, he had a decline in form because of that. So what does he do? He bowls a couple of back of length deliveries, and then he bowls the slow ball bouncer. And Rana just is able to only flap at it, and then it goes straight to the hands of your, short fine leg, right? So I just thought it was a very canny bowling performance from him.
Yeah, and if you watch a lot of Dwayne Bravo, which I do, that is something that he is known for. He's a thinking man's bowler.
Exactly.
But let's talk about the rest of that bowling attack because, I mean, I don't have anything really positive to say. I think Mitch Santner bowled okay. I don't know why he's in the squad.
You already have Jadeja, right?
Or there's a bevy of options there. I don't fully understand why he was picked, but considering he was picked, he played pretty well as a spinner. But I think Shivam Dubey.
It wasn't good.
Again, and I hate doing this because you know what? I respect the hustle. But on the other hand, why are you on my team?
It can be a little bit frustrating, right?
Yeah.
But no,
I think the other guy that we have to talk about, the sort of, because we've talked about the other 4 bowlers, was Adam Milne, who he just doesn't seem to be up to scratch because the guys that he's either replacing one of 3 guys, right? Lungi Ngidi, Josh Hazelwood, or Deepak Chahar.
Yeah, and he I mean, even though he has pace and he can hustle the batsman out a little bit with that, or worry them at least.
He's not one of those 3, and it kind of showed.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he bowled pretty well. I will give him that, but he never looked like he was taking the wicket, and he never really looked threatening in that sense. He
bowled. Yeah, I think that's a fair summation. He bowled okay, but he didn't really look penetrative enough. And for a guy who bowls that quick, that's a bit of a disappointment. And it is a disappointment from him. I've seen him bowl better than this, but yeah, it was a bit disappointing. Right. And it capped off in general, right, Ron? I thought what was a pretty disappointing defense of a total from CSK.
So Pratham, your takeaways for CSK?
Yeah, so there were a couple of things I noticed in this match, but I think the most significant in the context of the match was for CSK the running between the wickets. That it was just really shocking, quite frankly, to see, right? And it was shocking because, like, a lot of these players are athletic and fit and can take the quick single. They can steal the quick single, right? Like the likes of Jadeja and Uthappa today, for example, right? Who are amongst the fittest in their age group in Indian cricket today, it could be argued, were really hesitant and jumpy in attempting to complete certain singles, right? Which is, again, not something that you expect from them. And it was common. Like, there were about 5 or 6 of them, run out chances that were really obvious and not particularly well reasoned why there was a run being taken in the first place. So I don't think it has to do with like the athleticism or the fitness or anything of that sort, or the ability to take those quick singles. I think really the cause for those suicidal run attempts was, apart from the pressure that comes with losing your openers early on in the chase.
Behind in the match and all that.
Apart from that, I thought it was just a lack of clear communication, right? There were times where they just weren't communicating well enough to their partner when they wanted to take a single. And then there's also some ball watching, right? From the non-striker. So, they would watch the ball, right? If somebody called for a single and, they might, if they sensed the ball was coming towards them, right? It seemed like they were hesitating a little bit because they sensed the ball before going for the run. Sometimes even the striker was doing the same, right? And so that's something they need to get fixed, right? Because you need to make sure that your batsmen who are batting in partnerships have that sort of rapport developed where they understand the partner's capabilities of taking singles, and they only take singles when necessary.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that also sort of leads to my takeaway, because I think it's a symptom. It's not something that is inherent in the squad. I think it's part of the problem that CSK currently faces, namely that it is a new squad. These guys not a lot of these guys have played together before. They don't fully trust each other in that sense. They don't, because previous years CSK really good between the wickets. This year doesn't look like that's going to be happening. Because last year, right, they won the whole thing because of how they set up, and more importantly, the top order, right? The top order set the platform, the middle order built the lead, and the finishers down at the end of the order accelerated towards the finish, right?
Yeah.
Gaikwad and Conway on paper should be a great opening partnership, but it's still early days. And if they can't get that to click, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a long struggling season for CSK, because they need those two guys to click so they can get an opportunity to get 150 plus. Because I think you cannot win this IPL if you cannot get to that 150 mark in these matches so far, from what I can see, because this is not going to be played on wickets like the Kotla or the Chepak, where the ball is going to be slower and it's going to be harder to score. This is going to be played in batsman-friendly conditions.
Yeah.
And if you aren't able to score 150 runs, you are going to be behind the ball every single game.
No, spot on, man. Spot on. I think that opening partnership firing is super important for them. And yeah, I think
it should work. If it works, it's fantastic. If not,
but if it doesn't work, then you do have a lot of older batsmen who aren't necessarily the best in terms of reflexes to accelerate as quickly as they need to in situations when they're trying to set a defendable total, right? So yeah, really good point on your end there, everyone. I think it's really something they're going to have to work on. In terms of KKR though, right? I think they looked definitely. They had a really good start to their campaign, and they looked in really good stride. And the thing that I think they'll take away from this particular match that is very crucial for them is that Sheldon Jackson, the decision to pick him, right, seems like a very good addition to their lineup, right? And it seems to be a choice that is well made, because his keeping was excellent. I mean, like, this was a wicket where there was a little bit of tackiness, as we spoke about, right? Where the pace of the ball.
Keep MS Dhoni on a tacky wicket.
Yeah.
We're doing a pretty good job.
Exactly, right? Because there was some that missed, like Dhoni missed through his legs, right? One that went for 4, for example, and stuff like that, right? And that happens when at time to time when there's some moisture on the wicket. But he didn't make a mistake whatsoever, get Jackson, and he had those. Obviously, the highlight of his glove work being those stumping chances that he released. Those lightning fast stumping chances are fantastic, of Narayan Chakravarti, right? And in all of those cases, right, the ball was keeping low, and his balance, I was watching them, his balance was actually to the other side of the wicket. So he was actually able to, be in such a great position with his hands that they were able to intercept and clearly access the ball, and he was able to complete those stumpings even if he was slightly off balance to begin with. So yeah, I thought he served his job really well as a glovesman. He didn't really bat enough to give an impression, but I mean, he seems like a decent option. I think he's vindicated there.
If you have him down the order, number 6 as sort of that accumulator position, that's fine, because at number 7 and number 8, you have 2 of the most explosive batsmen in the IPL, IPL history.
Yeah, so, and obviously you can vary it up. He could do a Dhoni. He could bat at number 8 and never really show up like Dhoni did in the last season.
It gives you options, and having him in the squad, I think, makes it a more balanced squad, which is why I was like, okay, that makes sense. I can see why they were thinking about picking him. But my takeaway is I think that this KKR team might be the best KKR team I've ever seen. Like, genuinely speaking, in recent years at least.
Yeah.
They played very well. But again, it's early days, so we don't know what's going to happen. They could have an injury crisis, or they could not have, or they could have a bad run of bad results or bad form. And they just look like the team to beat right now.
They have good bowlers. The batting, which you could say could improve a little bit, did look very assured,
but they just look like the most solid team in the IPL right now. They have a settled squad. They have long-term stalwarts that are in the squad, and the guys that they brought in fixed problems that they've had in previous seasons, and it just looks like a much more composed squad. Obviously, the next few hours next 24 hours we might throw a couple of spinners in the works with the other two teams that might have a shot at that title, and Mumbai and Delhi playing. So yeah, we'll see. But they're my current pick to win it.
Fair enough. I mean, I don't quite share that sentiment, but it is an interesting sentiment to say the least. So that's it from us, guys. Tune in next week because we'll be covering the IPL match on Saturday for you guys. That's in store. We're also planning some other segments on the show, including a remembrance for Shane Warne. Obviously, that very tragic incident. So we'll try to go into detail a little bit about his life, his career, and just try to remember some of the really great moments of his cricketing career as such.
It's a weird feeling, but I'm looking forward to that for those segments.
Stay tuned for that, and till we see you next time, stay safe, take care, and see you next time. Bye bye.